I'm Mehdi Hasan.
I'm Owen Jones.
And we are Two Outspoken. Owen, good to see you. It's been a while.
It has been a while. I've missed you, Mehdi.
We took a summer break.
We did. It was quite an eventful summer. I think for you, I think this is quite a change for you, actually, which is the first time you've been in a room with someone who isn't a dead-eyed sociopath, if I can write my own reviews.
Is that because I'm speaking to you shortly after I spoke to a certain former Israeli spokesman in New York?
You get all the best gigs, don't you? Some of the worst people on earth, I would say, at this point. Who's next? Is it, I don't know, Freddy Krueger? Who's going to...
Not as bad as Freddy Krueger.
No,
yeah.
I think less charm.
Less charm.
Less charisma. Less appeal.
Actually, some of these people do have charisma. It's just what they do with it. And what we talk about, what we do with it, is a good segue to what I want to talk to you about today. Since we last spoke in the summer, things have only gotten worse in the Middle East, as you and I were warning they would. Mm. And the folks with the dead eyes have been making the case for new war, new genocide, new killing of civilians, just in a different part of the Arab world. This time, Lebanon. We're speaking this week after a horrific massacre on Monday. 550 people killed, at least. We don't know how many are still under the rubble. In Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, we're talking about 50 kids killed, over 90 women killed. It's insane. I was reading the New York Times. It is it may be the single day record for number of people killed for many years in a conflict. And yet very little outrage here in London, where we are, or in DC, where I normally am. It's just normalised.
Well, one of the deadliest days in the history of Lebanon, and Lebanon has a hideous history of brutality, including, of course, brutality by the Israeli state. I mean, the UN Secretary General, he's saying this could be another Gaza. I mean, you know, when we're at that point, you know, what we're talking about here is the normalisation of the mass slaughter of Arabs. The world is being told in no uncertain terms by Western governments and much of the Western media that Arab life means absolutely nothing. I mean, the fact hundreds of Lebanese civilians, and this is, I think, just to show this kind of normalisation, it's worth thinking back to when Israel invaded Lebanon back in 1982, and US Republican President Ronald Reagan got on the phone to the then Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and said, this is a Holocaust. You have to stop this. Yep. Now, the US Democratic President Joe Biden, I presume, is not on the phone to his Israeli counterpart, yelling down the phone to stop this Holocaust. And that was, you know, I mean, we've seen these terrible Israeli atrocities in Lebanon before, but the fact is, in Gaza, we've now had nearly a year, and we've had some of the worst atrocities of the 21st century live streamed to us every single day. And you would imagine now there's some sort of, well, whoa here, come on, this has to be contained. There isn't any of that.
It's the opposite, right? It's if you're the Israelis, you're like, well, they didn't stop us for a year in Gaza. Why not do Lebanon? And Joe Biden is a feckless president who hasn't stopped us in Gaza. There was reporting a few months back, which was they go into Rafah, then he's going to be really mad. And they went into Rafah, and he wasn't. And then there was reporting that, well, if they escalate the war in the region, America's not going to support them on that. And now they're saying, oh, yeah, by the way, if you need extra weapons for your new war in Lebanon, if Iran is provoked into entering the war, if et cetera, we've got your back. And if you're the Israelis, it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you?
No, exactly. I mean, they've been given carte blanche to do exactly what they want. I mean, it's striking as well. Some Israeli outriders, in fact, Israeli ministers are talking of, well, we've shown huge restraint. Even the BBC, which frankly its coverage has been often appalling, but they point out that 80% of the cross-border attacks between Lebanon and Israel have been perpetrated by Israel. And obviously, if we're looking at the death toll, I mean, you know, we're talking about 99% of those being killed. I mean,
just on Lebanese. Monday, I just want to put this into context, half as many people were killed as were killed on October the 7th, right? And these are civilians. Let's be clear. The health minister in Lebanon said these are almost all, if not all, civilians.
And he's not Hezbollah or anything.
He's not.
Like
they can't play the
no.
Hamas-controlled health ministry game in Lebanon. He's a neutral doctor, not affiliated with any particular party.
A technocrat. He's Sunni. He's not.
But you know, nobody cares. I mean, this is the frustration, and I think, you know, I said this in New York at the debate I was at the weekend. You know, we have opened the gates of hell well beyond Gaza. We've basically said anywhere around the world you can do this, you can get away with it. The regional implications, you and I and others have been warning since October 7th, if this turns into a regional war, it's a moral disaster, a legal disaster, a geopolitical disaster. And of course, for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it's a domestic political disaster. Do you really think that they're going to win an election if this escalates even more and America's dragged into a war with Iran, which is clearly what Netanyahu wants? Netanyahu's buying time for Trump.
Netanyahu can do any of this without knowing that he's got the US behind him, come what may. He can only escalate this because he's got the world's only hegemon behind him, and
who he's about to screw over.
Well, that's exactly it. He's calling their bluff. He knows, he can see in Gaza he's got away with everything. That the red line that Joe Biden's, the red lines he set in the past, are meaningless. That all Joe Biden will do occasionally is hand wringing, which he knows is for a domestic political audience. He knows that isn't, for Netanyahu, actions matter, not words. And again, the other similarity is Israel has not been subtle about its intent. From the very beginning in Gaza, and this is why we need to listen to them carefully. There was never, and Raz Segal, the Israeli-American professor, said it's almost unprecedented in history for a state to be so open about their intent. They said from the beginning, we're going to raise Gaza to the face of the earth. We're going to impose collective punishment. They did that. This time, for example, the Israeli Minister of Education on television, he said, we are going to annihilate Lebanon. It will be wiped out.
There's no difference, he said, between the Lebanese people and Hezbollah.
He said exactly that. And Yoav Gallant last year, the Minister of Defense, who has a request for an arrest warrant for war crimes and crimes against humanity from the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. He said last year that it will be the civilians of Lebanon who will pay the price. He said, we know what we've done in Gaza, we can do to Beirut. We've got to take them seriously because those blood-curdling threats were put into practice in Gaza.
Yeah, and the Minister for Diaspora Affairs, a super right-wing dude who loves to hang out with Marine Le Pen, he put a tweet out with like weird maps showing the redrawing of borders going back 100 years of Syria and Lebanon. He said Lebanon's not a real country. He said the enemy Shia population should be driven from the border. We should have a buffer zone, which just basically means we're going to take your territory. Like very grand geopolitical language. A buffer zone is a new word for just we're going to take your land.
Well, it's just ethnic cleansing. They're going to depopulate.
Occupation. Yeah. But funny when Medvedev and Putin say this about Ukraine, it's not a real country. We deserve a buffer zone. We need to annex this part of territory for security. The Western governments lose their minds. Western journalists rightly lose their minds. And just, as you say, I think it goes back to your original point. It's Arab life in an Arab country. It doesn't really matter.
Well, see, I mean, that contrast, I mean, this
the
is...
racism at the heart of this.
Well, exactly. And that's the fact that Ukraine's happening simultaneously provides...
Forever.
It's a live... It's a control. I mean, in a laboratory control where... And the world can see this. The world has seen how the West has responded when it comes to the pronouncements by senior Russian figures, even just Russian TV channel shows where they speak in...
And there's a like for like with Israeli channels.
Social media, well, I mean, I spoke to, what's his name? He's a courageous Israeli journalist. Why have I just forgotten? Gideon Levy. And he pointed out that actually it's worse, those Israeli television segments. And you'll get there on national television, including Israeli ministers, talking about collective punishment, and that's what they've enacted here. And I just think the point about Arab life there is the West is going to reap a bitter harvest for generations to come because, in the age of social media where people can see these atrocities, they can see Israeli soldiers throwing the bodies of Palestinians off roofs like they're ISIS. Yeah. They see all this, what's happened to children, the slaughter, the wiping out of Gaza. They can see this now happening in Lebanon, and they see just hand-wringing at best from the West, in contrast to Ukraine. And that is going to radicalize people for generations.
American intelligence agencies are already saying this. You don't need to be an intelligence official to know this. It's obvious. Hosni Mubarak, the Egyptian dictator who no one was a fan of, actually did say something very wise in 2003 when Bush and Blair were going to Iraq. He said, you're opening the gates of hell. You're going to create 1,000 bin Ladens. He was right about the Iraq war. Gaza has now become Iraq on steroids. So God help us all in the coming years. And by the way, should just plug, since you mentioned Israeli TV shows and how they speak about Palestinians, we did a documentary called Israel's Real Extremism, which covers some of this and interviews some of those TV hosts. So I would urge you, those of you who have not seen it, to check it out on the Zeteo website. Owen, before we run out of time, we've got to switch tack and talk about what is happening here in the UK. It's been a couple of months. When we last met, Labour had just been elected. England was still in the World Cup. Lots has changed since
those heady days.
In the European Championships, I should say. Sorry. It's been a lot. quite a busy couple of months for UK media and politics. Just quickly start. Labour government did a good job on arms licences by restricting some licences.
Well, look, let's be clear. They suspended 8%, and the bar really is on the floor, isn't it?
The bar was zero. The previous
bar was
government did
zero. And a really crucial point is Britain supplies crucial components for the F-35 jets, which are raining death and destruction on Gaza. They're all excluded from any of this. And by the way, when they did their 8% based on legal advice, so actually they're legally obliged to actually suspend arms sales to Israel, they basically just bent over backwards apologising for it, saying Israel's this great ally and all the rest of it. And that I think is a striking example of the political antennae of this government. Because if you look at the polling shows the vast majority of Britons want a total arms embargo. Over half of the British public want Netanyahu arrested for war crimes. The vast majority think Israel is committing war crimes. Yeah. And if you look now at where Labour's at generally, I mean, they won this landslide because of our electoral system. They didn't have any enthusiasm. They got 33.7% of the vote in the lowest turnout of British adults in the history of British democracy. And they've plummeted since. They're now, I mean, Keir Starmer is, according to one poll, less popular than Rishi Sunak, who is the defeated Conservative leader after a cataclysmic defeat for the Tories after the worst government in our history.
To put that in further context for those watching abroad, Sunak, of course, took over from Liz Truss, who was defeated by a lettuce.
By a lettuce.
Okay.
God bless the lettuce.
Labour Party conference. Keir Starmer giving a big speech. Heckled. What happened?
You know, he got heckled by someone who... Keir Starmer was talking about children in Britain, you know, talking about improving child's well-being with no policies to back it up. But someone heckled, what about the children in Gaza? He was then manhandled and thrown out. But the thing, Keir Starmer's response was really instructive. He laughed. He started laughing and said, this guy's obviously got a pass for the 2019 Labour conference when Jeremy Corbyn was leader. When I should add that at the time, Keir Starmer was at the conference. I know because I interviewed him at 2019 conference.
Corbyn loyalist.
He was in the shadow cabinet. He was a shadow minister, saying he was 100% behind Jeremy Corbyn. For me, that was borderline sociopathic. You're being heckled about slaughtered children, and
rather than engage. And as to be fair, Kamala Harris got heckled in America. First she got mad, and the next time they did it, she actually engaged and said, look, we're working for a ceasefire, which sadly they're not, but at least she engaged with the protest. To just mock the idea of protest as something a Jeremy Corbyn supporter would do, rather than anyone with a conscience.
What's he saying? He's saying, because he said, we've changed the party. What's he trying to say? We don't have a soul anymore. We don't. Oh, you care about Palestinian kids, do you? We'll get a time machine because we don't care about Palestinian kids anymore. What's he trying to say? I mean, and there was another, Rachel Reeves, the shadow.
She was heckled also.
She was the chat.
I saw that they physically pulled him out.
I interviewed this guy. So she's the finance minister, the chancellor, and he was dragged up by his throat by someone it turns out was a Labour councillor, a Labour local politician, and he's got these red marks all over his throat. I think he should take legal action. And again,
That's what social democracy looks like these days.
Well, clearly. I mean, there's a long history of that, to be honest, with Social Democrats being pretty brutal. But yeah, I mean, it just shows, again, you know, this is a Labour Party, a Labour government, I think, without a soul. They are still providing arms to Israel. They haven't, with Lebanon now, for example, Keir Starmer is saying that Britain should evacuate and all parties should de-escalate and come back from the brink.
He has not condemned them.
None.
Mass killing of
condemning.
Hundreds of civilians.
What does that tell us? And again, that complicity continues. The fact, you know, the bar was on the floor because, for example, Rishi Sunak, they were trying to stop the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant process with a vexation.
Which, to be fair, the Labour government has stopped trying to stop.
Exactly, but
what would they do? I mean, we've been hearing this for weeks now, that warrants are coming, the Chamber's looking at it. There've been lots of attempts to delay it from the Germans, from the Brits, from the Americans who aren't even signatories to the court. Now, the US administration, Joe Biden's ambassador to UN, went out of her way to say, we will not arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he's here. She seemed to think the arrest warrants were already out. They weren't. They're not. We're still waiting. But obviously the US is not a signatory to the ICC. To be fair, they don't have to. I mean, they should, but they don't have to. UK is. UK's been a strong supporter of the Rome Statute and the International Criminal Court throughout history since it was created. You wrote a really good piece for The Guardian, which was kind of an imaginary speech for Keir Starmer that I read. And one of the lines in there was like, we will execute arrest warrants. What's Keir Starmer going to do if the ICC comes out and says, okay, we approve arrest warrants, what is the British government going to
To
do?
be fair, I think they absolutely will say we'll abide by the ICC. I mean,
So just BB and Sarah can't come shopping at night.
I know they can't be off to Harrods. But they've been briefing. There was this ridiculous article. Well, not the article wasn't ridiculous. I'm not attacking my colleague in The Guardian, but the briefing was ridiculous because it said the British government was dreading the ICC arrest warrants because they hadn't prescribed the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, and people would say that's inconsistent. What does that have to do with anything? What are they talking about? It's just whataboutery, isn't it?
Well, one of the great lines at the debate I did with Elon Levy in Saturday was when he said, "Oh, the ICC's just picking on Israel." I was like, "You do know that he put out 5 arrest warrants requests, 3 for Hamas, 2 for Israel." I mean, that's not picking on Israel. That's actually giving Israel a pass, saying, well, fewer for you than for the other group. So it's just always...
Although one of those is now dead, I suppose. So
the Israelis killed a guy
exactly,
before he could get a trial. Some of us like the idea of trying people on all sides.
We agree, yeah, he should have been tried.
I have I always have to tell Americans, they get mad at me. I have the unpopular view that maybe you should have tried bin Laden, not killed him in the middle of the night in a secret raid. People go mad if you say that. It's like completely crazy to want a trial.
Well, it's a living in a Hollywood film, isn't it, for a lot of them?
It is.
It's
Although, but it's also the same people who love the idea of, due process and rule of law and courts.
No, but do you think, I mean, it is disturbing that they've not issued the arrest warrants. And there has been lots of, I mean...
unprecedented, I think it's fair to say. This kind of gap between his request, what was it, May?
There have been...
We're now into October?
The wrecking attempts, I think, delayed it, the likes of
100%.
the British government. But nonetheless, I mean...
And threats. Karim Khan, the chief president, talked about being threatened.
Well, we know
foreign
that.
Government.
Don't we know the history? Because his predecessor, this came out that Israel had tried to threaten them. They're basically like, "Oh, nice husband and kids you've got there."
That was Israel threatening his predecessor. Yeah. Karim Khan is saying it's even worse. It's other governments on Israel's behalf threatening him.
Well, almost we know the US. I mean, there's already evidence showed they're putting massive
we
pressure
broke the story at Zeteo that multiple Republican senators wrote a threatening letter to him saying, "We're going to come after your family, not just you."
But it's been put. A lot of. I mean, I don't know if you know Alonso Gamendi, a brilliant international relations lecturer. I mean, the point he made is international law will just collapse if they don't issue those arrest warrants. There will just be no credibility.
Again, it's one of the many things that will come out of Gaza that we will regret in years to come. The tearing up of the post-war settlement for one country. There's no way you can ever enforce any of this stuff again. The various conventions, the Geneva Conventions, the various treaties.
Yeah.
You see in the US this week, ProPublica is reporting that the US government, forget Human Rights Watch, forget UN rapporteurs, Francesca Albanese, forget all of them. The US State Department's own Bureau on Refugees told Blinken, the Secretary of State, Israel is in violation of American law. They're blocking American aid. We cannot send weapons. It's against American law. Blinken went to Congress, said the exact opposite. I'm told that it's fine. We're in accordance.
He covered it up, didn't he?
So he covered it's a complete cover-up. It's like Iran-Contra level cover-up.
But that shows, by the way, because the ICC case, what they focused on is starvation. It's the deliberate starvation, which is obviously a heinous war crime.
Unimpeachable and undeniable.
Yeah.
Just to come back to our friend Sir Keir Starmer.
Our buddy boy.
If arrest warrants come out, will he read them closely with his Wahid Ali paid glasses?
Well,
talk to me about Wahid Ali. Tell the world what is going on with Lord Wahid Ali, because every time I go on Twitter and see a clip from British News, it is a Labour minister saying, yes, I took money from Lord Wahid Ali to have a birthday party, to go to a concert, to buy clothes, to have glasses. What is he doing?
He's just a very generous man, Mehdi, because, look...
Well, I also saw a clip of West Streeting saying, giving money is public service.
He said we should cheer out. It's like charity. It's just a noble thing for people to do.
The left is now embracing the idea of big money donors.
West Streeting is not the left. Can you just take that back? Wahid Ali, he's a long-standing Labour donor. He's extremely rich, very deep pockets.
And just to be clear, no one's saying anything wrong.
No, this is all perfectly
And I actually
legal.
don't think he's the villain of this story. I think it's these Labour ministers who look so desperate and tacky.
If you take Keir Starmer...
I think he paid for a 40th birthday party of one of the ministers.
Yeah, which apparently cost £13,000. What happened at this birthday party?
What are they eating? Gold.
But it's just ridiculous. I mean, Keir Starmer's taken more freebies in hospitality than every Labour leader since 1997 put together. That includes Tony Blair, by the way.
Wow.
Now, that's £100,000 worth of freebies in hospitality.
He's also not a poor man.
Top 1%. I think he can more... I mean, they paid, I think it was £13,000 worth of clothes for him and his wife, who didn't properly declare. I think
that's what really bothers me. I'm sorry to get into the nitty gritty of the quote unquote corruption,
legal
corruption, which is like if it was he bought them a trip to like the Bahamas, I'd be like, all right, I get it. he bought her clothes to wear. Like,
know.
did she have to check with him first?
£2,500 worth of glasses.
Like glasses?
What glasses?
What happens? Does he go with them to Specsavers? Like, what?
I know.
How does this work out?
Does he give them the money? Does he give them vouchers? I don't know.
Do they send them photos from like the shop?
Is he kissed out even that well dressed? Like, what is it? Where are these clothes? What is he
I don't
doing?
understand how the conversation happens. Like, he goes, "Kia, do you need some clothes?" And he goes, "Yes, please. I'd like a jacket and some jeans." I don't.
Yeah, because if one of my friends asked to buy me clothes, I'd just be. Well, I mean, I was.
Like I said, I'd take a trip to the Bahamas if somebody says I want to buy you a trip. I think that's very generous of you, but like, I'll buy you your T-shirt.
But the reason it's gone down like a cup of sick, if I'm honest, is they came to power and said, "Oh, the finances are really tough, so we're going to have to take winter fuel payments away from pensioners, including really poor pensioners. We're going to keep the 2-child benefit cap that drives huge numbers of children into poverty and hardship. I'm sorry, guys, life's going to be really tough for you. We've got to make sacrifices. Oh, we're just going to take tens of thousands of pounds of freebies on top of our already reduced." And this is the worst one, because they got Taylor Swift tickets, which were worth thousands of pounds, and they used their kids as human shields. They said, "My kids really want to go." Loads of people's kids want to go to Taylor Swift. You have to pay for the tickets. What's wrong with you? They're not on your salary. It's annoying. It's aggravating.
All right, well, last point on this, because we're out of time, but I do know you feel strongly about that. I think it's an important point to make. This is all about Labour not really having any kind of vision right now. Right?
What is it?
Come to it's just a bunch of careerists. Is that fair to say? And this is what happens to a government. Normally it happens a few years in. It's happening a few months in.
Oh, a few years. This feels like a fag end of a government already. I went to Labour conference and I ran after ministers who didn't want to speak to me. And the problem is there's no vision hanging it together. They were handed power because the Tories destroyed themselves. And this wing of the Labour Party are the sorts of people who see politics as a way of getting a bit of power, getting a bit, you're in it's often called politics, showbiz for ugly people. I'm not commenting on the looks of the Labour front bench, but that's what it's often called. And then you end up using it as a springboard to get lucrative jobs in the private sector, often related to the ministerial job you once had. And I just think the problem is that it's not going down well with the British public, who are sick of austerity. They want something different. They want change. And now they see more politicians on the take. It looks a little bit like a Tory government at the end of a Tory government.
What a way to end our first episode back after a summer break. It looks like a... my word.
We've got to work with the material we've got.
The name of the show, Two Outspoken. I appreciate you being so outspoken. I'm sure they'll love you for it. Owen, a pleasure. Hope to see you soon.
See you soon, buddy. See you in a bit.
Cheers.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.